Good morning, everyone. My name is April, and I'm here with Guy Siverson. I hope I didn't mess up your name too poorly.
You got it. Not a problem.
And what attracted me to share his journey with travelers and with all of you listening or watching the recording is his bike experience. He hopped on a bike and took a 1,600-mile bike ride across Idaho and was there in
Yeah.
the middle of August. So tell us what inspired you to do this. Were you a biker before you got on the bike?
Well, it would be really good if I could answer that question as a yes, but the answer is no. In fact, I owned my own digital marketing firm at that point, and I I was much more of your computer chip, not couch potato, but computer chip type individual, and I had just turned 50.
Okay.
Um, I decided that well, I felt called to do something quite unique, which was this trip. My brother and my sister are both much more active than I am,
Okay.
but I said, you know what, this is what we're going to do. I think as we get this started, it's important also to note that July of that very same year, which happened to be when I turned 50, is when my first wife died. Now, we had been divorced for 10 years, but she
Okay.
happened to die in July. We had already planned this trip prior to that.
Okay. All right.
So there is a little bit of a grief uh, recovery. And, okay, so we'd been divorced for 10 years, but when somebody dies, it still is somebody that was important to you.
Right. It's still impactful, especially if this was a long-term relationship of any kind.
Yeah. And we were married for 14 years. So yes, it was. Um, all right. So then I started to do work with my trainer and whatnot because we're coming from being a computer chip
Yeah.
to taking on what people around me were saying I would not return from.
Yeah. I can only imagine. So was it your brother and sister's idea and you kind of just, for some reason, pulled you, as you said, you were
No,
called to go? Oh, it was your idea.
it was completely called to me. I'm a spiritual individual,
Mm-hmm.
and so God called me to do this right. I don't know even to this day why,
That's interesting.
but
Yeah.
I knew I was called to do this right. Um, but I was being told by people I'm going to be ran over by a semi. I'm going to not survive because, along with being a computer chip, I'm also a naturopathic vegan, which
Oh,
in their book that means I don't eat protein.
right. And it also means to a lot of people, they're thinking if you're going to camp or, yeah,
Yeah.
their mind just goes to what are you going to eat? How are you going to survive?
Right? Exactly. Exactly. And it's within that dynamic that I finished the training and started the first day of the ride. Do you have any questions before I start getting into that first day?
Um, so you did have a trainer that helped you prepare for the ride.
Absolutely.
So you had probably 30. Were you preparing 60 days? How far in advance did you start the?
Because of my lifestyle, sedentary wise prior, I actually started 6 months before
Oh, okay. Okay.
because I wanted to make sure I could do the ride.
Right. That makes sense. And did you have then, it sounds like your sister you mentioned and your brother. Did you have any other support people kind of helping guide you along the way in case something happens?
My sister and brother knew nothing of this ride.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They had no clue that the ride was taking place.
Okay.
My support, human wise, was my wife who drove. I don't know which pictures you selected of mine that I provided for you, but drove the Ford Focus, the orange Ford Focus.
Okay. Yeah, I did see that
And
picture.
there's actually a story there, but I'd like to hold off on that story for just a minute while we dive into the beginning of the ride.
Yeah, yeah, get started. So,
All
uh,
right, fair enough.
did you pick the route then?
Yes, yes, I chose the route. And for those that know anything about Idaho,
Which a lot of us
there's those flat
probably don't.
states. What's that?
I said a lot of us probably don't because I think a lot of people, Idaho and Iowa get intermixed for what I don't know if they sound alike, but a lot of people think
Fair enough.
Idaho, they just think potatoes. And a lot of people for whatever reason they don't visit Idaho. They don't go there.
Fair enough. So when you think of Texas, when I think of Texas, I think flat.
Right.
When I think of Kansas, I think flat. Idaho is not flat. Idaho during the entire trip, and I do want to come back to the beginning because there's something that's super important. But during the entire trip, I went over, I believe, 11 mountain passes.
Wow, 11.
Yeah.
No wonder people are thinking, because now I'm thinking Colorado, and you're right, the semis are going on those routes. It gets
Mm.
narrow. You have these inclines, and then you have these like steep grades going down the other
Right.
side.
And that is the type of terrain that my journey took.
Okay.
There's something more about the environment. We'll get back to that in a minute. Can I go ahead and get us started on the day
Yes.
one?
Yes, go for it.
All right. Day one. That's the day when you have all the energy and all the enthusiasm. And, you've been planning for this day
Right.
for 6 months. And, well, I knew my support, which was my wife, would be right behind me. So when I reached down to get my water bottle and noticed I only had one of them on my bike,
Ooh.
I had no concern
Okay.
because I knew my wife
Yeah.
was right behind me.
Right.
And it happened to be an extremely hot day in August when we were leaving. And actually, we left from Spokane, headed to Lewiston. And I'm there trucking along and doing my water, the whole 9 yards and whatnot, until my water ran out.
Yeah.
But I knew my wife was right behind me. What I didn't know was that she had gotten delayed
Oh.
back at home, taking care of some other things that needed to be done before we headed out on this 7-week journey.
Right.
If you're exercising in extreme heat and not getting your fluids, what is that going to do to your body?
Oh yeah, you're just dehydrating, and you kind of go, if anyone's not had this happen, you start to, you're not even aware it's happening actually. I was out at an art show, but you start to sweat a little bit. Sometimes you don't even sweat. You just kind of keep moseying along, but pretty soon you're kind of getting brain fogged a little bit.
I was to the point of dizzy.
Oh dear.
I was in trouble and I knew it.
Yes.
And this was
Yeah.
day one.
Yeah.
So I look over to the right and I see there's a convenience store. And I
Hey.
think, all right, there's a convenience store. I'm going to get my water. I take my bike, I take it in there. I go to the door, push on the door, and then I notice it. It's around the door handles. And it's more of an iron type thing. You see, the day was Sunday.
Oh.
And on Sunday, certain businesses close.
Right.
Apparently, this was one of those.
Right. Oh dear.
So they were closed.
So the one convenience store is now. Oh dear.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yes.
So my source of resource for water was nowhere to be found.
Oh my gosh.
My ability to get water from this convenience store was impossible.
Yeah.
I was getting dizzy and I prayed, Lord, I need help. I'm in trouble and I know it. I turn around, getting back on my bike, and a dizzy person that is getting disoriented does not belong on a bike. But
Nope.
what else do I do? There's no shade anywhere.
Right.
And I turn around and I look at the street, and right there sitting in front of me is a police officer.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I go over to the police officer and I say, "Sir, I'm in trouble. I am dehydrated and I have no water. And I know I'm in trouble." He got out of his car, into his trunk, and took from his own water source to make
Wow.
sure that I would stay hydrated.
Oh, nice. Wow.
That's day one.
But the
At least
power,
that's
the power of like prayer, as you said, in a way too, because that's what I
absolutely,
was thinking. I mean, you're sometimes at that dark spot where you're just like, where am I, where, how am I going to get out of this? You know, what's the,
absolutely, absolutely, 100%. And it took me a little while to get my electrolytes back balanced
yeah,
again, but I was able to go forward, and the rest of that day was very successful. So on day one of the 1,600-mile ride, I almost failed
right.
in a very serious way, because if you get too dehydrated, dehydration can actually cause death.
Yeah. And it has. I mean, we've heard several examples where these hikers go out, maybe they're not prepared, and unfortunately, they're found later they didn't make it. And maybe they were close to the side of the road, but for whatever reason, they
Yeah.
didn't make it to help.
So if I were to give you one really critical thing based on what you just said and what I brought forward, make sure you are prepared. If it's a bike ride, make sure that you have the water that will sustain you. And if you find an error, like I missed a water bottle, how difficult would it have been? It was just a couple miles in. How difficult would it have been for me to simply turn my bike around, go get that second water bottle?
Right.
Don't rely even on your support team itself if you have a logical answer that will be able to uh, give you the relief that you need.
Right.
All right. So there's day one. What more questions do you have?
Um, well, you answered how you prepared physically and a little bit mentally. Talk about the route and some of the sights that you saw along the way, because I'm sure over
Well,
that 1,600 miles.
you know, what I'll say on that, Idaho is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But I am certain it was more beautiful in many places than what I saw.
Okay.
The reason for that is this was the year 2015. If you remember back what was going on in Idaho in 2015, there were fires everywhere.
Yeah. A lot of fires.
And they were not just, okay, I've got a tree on fire over here. They were serious evacuation fires.
So how did that impact your route since that can just change in like hours notice?
It didn't impact my route.
Okay. But there was
But
smoke then.
imagine going through towns that have been evacuated,
Oh my gosh.
where it's saying class four fire evacuation situation, and knowing the town is no longer there,
Wow.
but you are.
Yeah.
So I still, what I ended up doing, what it impacted is how I went through it, because I got goggles and I got a bandana, because there's times where I was going through some serious smoke.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the smoke because it can
Mm,
linger, can travel for miles and just be hanging over. And those little particulates, as they say, just you're breathing them in. You don't even maybe see them, but it can be very dangerous
it can be.
for
It
being
can.
out all day exercising on your body.
Yeah, and it can be. And so I would go through these areas, and evacuation, I would just continue going through with my wife behind me with the red car. Um, I never saw any fire. I
Okay.
never, I never actually saw any flames of any fire, but I did definitely go through smoke.
So part of the ride is through small towns. It was through the mountain passes,
Yes.
trees.
So one of the mountain passes that I went up, I happened to be catching a cold that day.
Oh no.
And that's difficult enough. Typically, I don't catch a whole lot of colds because of the way that I uh, choose to have my lifestyle, which I think is part of what actually brought me through.
Mm-hmm.
But this day, I was definitely catching a cold.
Oh no.
And I'm going up a mountain pass. And I am struggling to fight all the way up the mountain pass. I make it to the top of the pass. But at the top of the pass, that's the one and only area where I put my bike on the back of the car and we went down into Yakima.
Okay.
And I spent about 2 to 3 days recovering, and then I was able to be back on the road.
Right. Right.
If it wasn't for, if there was any one point where I was extremely thankful to have a sag wagon, that's what it's called when there's a
Right.
car following a bike, to have a sag wagon, it was right at that point. Because I don't think I had it in me to make it down into Yakima, which was about another 60 miles that
Oh
day.
wow. Yeah.
I didn't have it in me,
Yeah.
which is again that. So number two is although I recommend having your support in place, understand your limitations. And if your limitations won't allow you to succeed in what you are doing and where you're going at that moment, make alternatives, even if it means to kind of, like I did, load the bike on the car and I went down into Yakima.
Right. And don't take that as a quote failure that you had to take a break, so to speak. You just needed to protect yourself. It's protecting your body and you just and recognizing, which was smart, that you know what, this isn't going to happen because the outcome could have turned poor should you have
Right,
forced
right.
yourself.
And so I talked about hydration. Something else that comes to mind is almost the final um, mountain pass that I went up, because it says nutrition here, number level.
Yeah.
And in that story, that journey, I'm going up what's called Whitebird Pass. Now, my first pass that I went up was Lewiston, the Lewiston Grade. And at that time, at the beginning of my journey, I thought that was a pretty tough pass. I had no idea how much more difficult Whitebird Pass would be.
Oh,
It's
really?
about 3 times the amount of what Lewiston Pass is. And just talking about nutrition, there was I'd say I was probably about halfway up. There's a car pulled over alongside the road with some people outside it and whatnot. They're, in a safe area where they can, they're enjoying some nutrition.
Right. Yeah.
And they holler at me and they say, "Hey, you want a sandwich?" And I holler back and say, "You probably don't have the food
Oh, right.
that I would eat because I'm a naturopathic vegan."
Right.
They said, "Well, we're vegetarian." I said, "I'm stopping."
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
I enjoyed with them for a little bit some nutrition. I just took the cheese off. That's really not a big deal. And it gave me the ability to make it the rest of the journey up. I made it all the way up Whitebird Pass, but that's I think it's like 4.5 miles up.
Wow.
And the interesting part is that was one of the last passes. The very last pass was actually Lewiston again, because what I did was I kind of did a circle loop around Idaho, went down to where Yellowstone is,
Okay.
Wyoming, and then came back. So Lewiston ended up being the first and the last.
Okay.
And by the time I got back to Lewiston again, it was like, what is this? This isn't anything now.
Right.
So another thing that you mentioned earlier was, was there any close calls? And
Yeah,
there
I was
was.
just gonna say, was there at any point where you just were like, I can't continue. This is just not.
Well, there was this point where, well, there's two of them. It was a rainy day. If you're a biker in Idaho, you're going to have sun and you're going to have rain. And I think I even had sleet, and, and just all sorts of things. But it was a rainy day. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But on this particular rainy day, I suddenly had the voice speak to me, told me to get off the road now.
Wow.
Basically, just get off the road right now. So I got myself off the road and off my bike and whatnot. And I looked behind me. There's this oversized semi
Right, right.
coming that had these concrete um, objects that were extending beyond the bed that the
Oh
semi was
yeah,
on.
and they'll
Or,
extend
yeah,
sometimes over the lanes that you'll see
yeah,
them, right?
yeah. There would have been no room for me.
Oh my goodness.
There would have been, at that point, there would have been, it was a very skinny area on the highway, and you get bigger areas, you get skinny areas. This was a very skinny area. There would have been no room for me.
Right, and by the time the trucker is coming, depending on if he's going up or down, he's progressing at the speed he is. If you're not getting out, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, in that very same day, I mentioned that it was kind of rainy and hilly
Yeah.
and such that day. Well, rain started getting harder. And I couldn't tell that we were about to get a downpour. And
Mm.
I don't just mean, it's raining harder. I mean a downpour. And I say, Lord, I need a shelter now.
Right, yeah.
You don't get a whole lot of shelters in the middle of nowhere.
No, uh-uh.
There happened, I looked over to my right, and there's this barn with an overhang. And I said, all right, I've got to make it to that barn, which means I'm going to be trespassing.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got to make it to that barn before this before this rain hits.
Right,
I
right.
barely made it there.
Oh my goodness.
I barely made it there, and then the torrential water just came down, and I was able to be out of it.
Oh,
That was
that's
nice.
good. Yeah, that is nice that you were able to
So
seek shelter.
go ahead.
I said that was good that you were able to seek shelter like that when you needed it.
Yep.
But
Yep.
again, that
Now
that
there's a
message of just listening to your gut, listening to the signs that are coming to you.
Yep. Now there is another rain. I had many rain things that I went through, even though it was the middle of August. I rode up into Cascade, Idaho.
Ooh.
Beautiful area, absolutely beautiful area. On my way down, my wife's supposed to be behind me, and we get kind of a little bit confused, shall we say. And the rain, in this case, I'm not missing this rainstorm. I'm going through it. And on the way down the other side, I came up from Boise area through Cascade. And on my way down, the rain really started hitting. Well, somehow my wife and I lost track of where each other was.
Oh no.
So I'm trying to figure out where she is. She's trying to figure out where I'm at. She had pulled off to wait for me. Well, she missed me or something. But anyway, we both lose track of where each other is. And I'm going down near the end of the pass. And up going the other way, I watch an ambulance go up.
Ooh.
Well, I think that's where my wife is.
Oh no. Right, right. Oh dear.
And so I'm like saying, I certainly hope my wife being lost and that ambulance have nothing in common.
Yeah.
And yet, for about a half hour, 45 minutes, I'm kind of like they're moving ahead in the rain as I can. Well, she saw the ambulance too.
Oh no.
And now she's thinking that the ambulance has something to do with me.
Right, right. She's thinking, do I
And we're both seeing the ambulance, and it's like, well, neither one of us was injured, but there's another key point within the entire process. When you think things are going wrong, don't lose your cool. And just continue until you know something else is happening. Continue in what you understand is to be what you're supposed to be doing.
right.
It was about 45 minutes later, my wife and I met up, and we were both okay.
Yeah, and so excited to reconnect at that point.
Yeah. But the anxiety of the process and whatnot made it seem like I need to be doing something here when I didn't need to be doing anything at all. All I needed to do was stay the course.
Right. Keep going. So what do you think you learned about yourself during this whole journey?
Great question. Um, I think I learned that in fact, it has been a learning process, but I think I learned that I have the ability to stay in it, even if the adverse situations seem to be beyond my ability to comprehend.
Right.
And I really think that's something that each one of the listeners in this story, that if there's one thing I'd like them to take away as they are preparing for their own bike ride, for their own journey, for their own venture, you are going to have obstacles. But that doesn't mean they are insurmountable. It means you are going to have obstacles. And obstacles are a growth process in motion. I haven't yet shared something that I wanted to share in this yet. I know we were talking about half an hour. May I have a couple more minutes?
Oh, of course. Yes, please.
Awesome. So I was told at the beginning of this journey that I would not make it and that I really ought to give this up before I start.
Wow.
And they said, if you don't, they were basically telling me, if you don't lose because of your nutritional level, you will lose because you're going to be roadkill.
Oh.
That's just, this isn't a good situation. Encouraging people are not always so encouraging.
Yeah, I was just
Um,
gonna say that wasn't very much like go get it. You could climb that mountain, you
right,
could walk that trail and bike it. No.
right, exactly. There was a time where I was in an extreme wind. I was in so much wind that I had to get off my bike and push my bike.
Oh,
I could not propel my bike forward.
right.
That's when encouragement happened. I had somebody that pulled over. I wasn't hitchhiking. I was pushing my bike to where it needed to be. I had some, my wife had gone ahead to try and secure accommodations for us for that night. I had somebody that pulled over and said, you know what? I did this exact same thing in Canada, and I can see you are in need. Let's get your bike in the car and I'll take you to your destination. That's where encouragement happens. That was the only other time where I had somebody help me out in the process. Oh, I
Right.
had people hand me water bottles, had that type of encouragement, but that individual. But that's not what I'm trying to get at. Um, Probably about the last week of the ride, I don't know if you have the picture of the car up there or not. I would encourage it. I was driving to church for that day. I wasn't driving my bike. I was driving the car.
Right.
It's a 5 mile trip from the campsite to the church.
Right.
I was turning into the church
Okay.
when somebody else decided it would be a good time to pass my vehicle.
What? Oh no.
And so basically, I turned into the church and they T-boned my car.
I saw the damaged picture of the car and I was like,
Yep,
how did
yep,
this play into the story?
yep. And that was part of the story. They were driving a utility truck.
Ooh.
I was driving my Ford Focus. The people that were the naysayers about my trip, had this vehicle been going 10 miles faster, probably would have been right,
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
but not because I was on my bike.
Right. You were in your car.
I was in the car at the time. And that's what really, really makes it a very interesting story is I was in my car at the time.
That itself, that experience alone of being T-boned in the smaller vehicle, I think that would have shook my confidence, my courage to kind of get back on the bike from that point. I don't know.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
I finished the ride. I finished the ride. If you notice, the window there has the plastic window at that point.
Yeah.
So my wife, my loving dear wife, in order to uh, be the sag wagon, had to endure,
Yeah.
and it was very very annoying for her. But that again is showing the love that how love can operate in dreams or in visions or in plans or in goals coming true. We both survived, and the car not so much so.
Right.
But it was an amazing journey. The whole full 1,600 miles did happen. And then those people that had been being the naysayers when we got back, suddenly they had nothing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes it's just that. Sometimes when you encounter people that are naysayers, you need to take that, and that should be part of your encouragement to be like, you know what, I'm just going to show them I can do this. I can do X, whatever that goal is that you have. Take it upon yourself as your own personal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, did you have any other questions as we approach kind of the crescendo of this story?
Yeah, talk about
Do you
maybe
have any other questions?
yeah, maybe a little bit about some of the people that you met along the way. It sounds like you met some amazing people. You know,
Yes.
sometimes we worry about being alone on a bike, you know, we're making a journey like this that, you know, again, you hear the naysayers that are like, you're going to encounter some crazy people or someone might try to rob you or, you know, even in the United States, unfortunately, we don't live in such a, what we once perceived as a safe, loving place anymore.
That's true. Um, how I would answer that is I had zero people that were um, the type of people that we think is makes up the U.S. now.
Right.
I had zero people out there that were, tried to do mean things to me. I had lots of people who stopped and helped in certain situations, handed me a water bottle,
Wow.
um, encouraged me, uh, just enjoyed some time hearing the journey, the story. I did not have one individual out there that was more aggressively self-serving, is one way that I would put it.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
it was the most fantastic time that I had on a journey like this ever, largely because I'd never taken any other journey like this. But that too was a concern people were bringing forward was, the people out there aren't nice.
Right.
Well, if I look around the community, I can see a lot of not nice people in the community. Who we end up uh, connecting with is who we will find is either nice or not nice. And the best way to know for sure you're connecting with a nice person is to be nice.
Yeah, I think that's a huge, what you just said is huge. That simple smile that we give to someone at the grocery, when someone's making a coffee, just being giving a little, like I always tell people, one small word of encouragement, one small smile, one small compliment can make a world of difference in someone else's life. We have no
Absolutely.
idea.
And you know who that someone just, I know this is not necessarily directly related to the story, but you know who that someone we affect most is?
Must be ourselves.
Ourselves. Ourselves. Not that we don't affect the others positively, but as we spread out that positive, uplifting, encouragement, uh, hope message, we take in that exact sprout of what we are planting.
Right. It's huge. So, what advice do you have for someone else who thinks they would like to take a journey, feels the call to take a journey, just wants to get out there on their bike and explore the United States?
I don't care if it's bike, foot, skateboard, or whatever the situation. Prepare, make sure that you have the resources you need, believe that you can do it, and don't let the naysayers get in your way. The naysayers might be right, but if you don't try, you'll never know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's true. And the way I look at it is sometimes it's like, you may take you a couple attempts, but turn those naysayers into the ones that go silent because you were able to accomplish, you were able, just keep going after whatever that goal is that you have. They tell you can't write a book, just keep writing, keep doing it, just keep at it little by little.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you will reach a goal. The goal you reach might not be the same goal you headed for, but you will reach a goal. Even if I had to stop after the first day, at least I reached the goal of the first day.
Exactly.
I never start, I will never reach any goal at all.
Right. Yeah, I always think that too. You'd rather die trying than never to have tried at all. Because,
Absolutely.
what was that? You sat and on your couch and ate the chips, or got
Right?
out there and gave it a try. And with each day, I think you keep putting that foot in front of the other. I think that's just, you just got to keep trying. What else? There's no other way
Absolutely.
to go.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been incredible, Guy. So if people have
Oh, I'm
questions,
glad you invited me onto your call.
I think, yeah, well, I think the messaging is just so true. It doesn't matter what age you are. I love hearing stories of, I never got on a bike until I was 50. I never painted a painting till I was, old. Age has nothing to do with it. I think that's another takeaway for people is, you know, you don't have to be 20 to start something. You can create your existence, your life, your journey as you want. It's your journey, it's your book, it's your story. So putting that foot in front of the other and doing it. And that's exactly what you shared today. So how can people reach you? What's your website? What are
So
you up to now?
what I recommend is we are putting together a course. Now, the course has nothing directly to do with bike riding, but the course has everything to do with pain relief. You see, since that time, I've become a massage therapist. My wife and I are massage therapists, which is an incredibly other story, which I'd be glad to share with you. It's an amazing story. It's a totally different type of journey, but
Yeah.
we'll talk about that after the call. So we have just released what's called uh, a course on arthritis and how to succeed in overcoming arthritis naturally, holistically.
Nice.
And it's called the website stopyourpain.info. The
Stop
course
your
itself,
pain info.
stopyourpain.info.
Okay.
info. The course itself, the basic level course, costs $1 to get involved.
Hey, $1. You can't.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm
You can't
pushing it
even.
harder.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't even think you can buy a cup of coffee anymore for a
There you
dollar.
go. Right.
Yes.
Right. So it costs $1 to get involved in the basic level, and so you can kind of see the dynamic between my wife and I.
That's fabulous. So we'll share the website. Do you have
So
other
that's
ways?
stopyourpain.info. And if you want to get in touch with me direct, I recommend doing texting. If you call this number, you'll talk to a man by the name of Gio, who is my scheduler or VA. Probably don't want to talk to him. But if you text me at 605 574 1998, I'd be glad to dialogue further about this with you.
Great. That's wonderful, Guy. So we'll share all that additional information as well in the show notes, in the description, and in the social media post. But this has been amazing and so inspiring on so many levels, Guy. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. And if you happen to be a person who is looking for a guest speaker to come on your podcast, your show, whatever the situation, I am more than willing to do that. That's exactly what's happening here. Reach out to me at that number, 605 574 1998, and let me know. Let's figure out if we can connect together. Other than that, I just thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come out today and share this story with your audience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Guy. It's been wonderful. So for more inspiring stories, check out the-travelcollective.com and find all of Guy's information as well in the show notes. Thank you.